Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Monday, October 20th, 2025. Halloween. Holy cow. Halloween's in like 11 days. That's pretty wild. What does Canada think about the potential for Mamdini, is that his name, Mamdini, to be the mayor of New York City? Most people are actually against it, which I was kind of surprised about, which tells you how rigged everything really is. I have a hard time believing that New York as a city is okay with what's happening. But again, I don't think they could do anything to stop it. This is a freight train coming bearing down on them. The U.S. government shut down, and we're going to look at a whole bunch of U.S. government stuff. Trump talking about no kings and some other things. And I just think it's interesting. And I think that it has some impact on Canada, but I'll leave it for the end of the show. We've got a really robust grab bag of governance to start the show today. Internet outage and digital ID. And I've got Catherine Austin Fitz talking about digital IDs and what's going on with that. But there's a massive outage this morning. Canva, it's AWS is down. So Amazon Web Services, right? So that's Canva, that's Roblox, that's Fortnite, that's a whole big ton of platforms, massive platforms that are just borked. So that's interesting. And AWS is the kind of backbone that just doesn't go down, but now it's down. So if you build your digital ID on something like that and it fails, then your whole digital ID thing crashes. And I just think it's interesting. The internet, you have to assume that you're going to have downtime. I've had people, I work on the internet, right? I build websites for people. I help people with their websites. I do SEO and things like that. And so people say, a lot of people don't understand how the internet works, and it's basically just a bunch of computers. And when you update computers, sometimes they go down, and you have to know that that happens. It's never going to be 100% uptime. Now, you can have multiple servers with backups and fail safes and all sorts of other stuff so that it doesn't look like it's down necessarily. But sometimes even Apple's gone down. Like Apple's website's gone down. I've seen it in the 2010s Z's, right? But it happens. It sure does. And massive web outages for things like Amazon, it happens, and it's happening right now. And so that's interesting. But when you add on to that something that's necessary for life, can you imagine if your digital ID is necessary for you getting out of your district to get to work, and Amazon backbone's down, and you're like, beep, and it doesn't let you out, and you're like, well, sorry. And then, but nobody can get out, right? So people won't stand for that. People will just be like, oh man, look at that. It's a digital outage day. Yay, it's just like a snow day, except the government's not letting me go to work. Woo. And then how quickly before the government starts exploiting that, right? And man, it's absolutely wild. Mocha gets the mayor of, I can't remember the name of the little town, to resign after his report goes public on the money going missing from the gravel pit. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we're starting with a big grab bag of governance. And this is 10 years since Justin Trudeau got elected. Man, what a disaster, right? What an absolute disaster that's happened. We've got liberals. I've got Karina Gould celebrating 10 years of liberal destruction. Like, what a ridiculous thing to have happen. A Lion Advocacy starts us off today. He says, 10 years ago, Canada was more united. Per capita GDP, gross domestic product, was higher. Employment was higher. Housing was more affordable. Streets and communities were safer. Canada's world ranking for well-being and happiness was higher. Are Trudeau loyalists actually celebrating this lost decade? Yes, they are. Justin Trudeau says 10 years ago today, Canadians chose a more hopeful path. I'll never forget that night in 2015, the energy, the optimism, and the belief that together we could build a better future. And then look what happened. I mean, obviously, a terrible, terrible showing after such high expectations, right? And Dan McTeague, yes, I muted Justin Trudeau the second he was no longer the prime minister because I don't want him clogging up my feed at all. So apologies for even bringing him up. But Dan McTeague says, you destroyed, Justin, a country, its finances, optimism, and prosperity. You will be known in history as the only Canadian prime minister to lead his country astray. But that isn't all to the unfinished business of being charged criminally for the misdeeds you tried to bury. So I don't know that he's going to be charged criminally, and I don't know that he's going to be the worst prime minister or the only prime minister to lead the country astray. Mark Carney seems to be doing a good job of that too. Here's Karina Gould, and Brian says, imagine celebrating what your government did to Canada over the last 10 years and being so proud of it, you turn off your comments, right? And yes, of course, Karina Gould turned off her comments, right? So nobody can comment on this one. Don't mention it. But she says, and 10 years later, I'm still focused on you, she says, looking in the mirror, feeling very grateful to have reached this special milestone. The destruction that these people have caused is unbelievable. Here is Keith, and he's responding to Mark Carney, the current prime minister in today, right now. Mark Carney says, we're building stronger, safer communities with stricter bail laws, tougher sentences for violent and repeated offenders, and big investments to hire 1,000 new RCMP personnel. And again, I was talking the CBSA, the Canadian Border Services, and the 1,000 RCMP. I don't think that's happening. I don't think they can train these people. They don't have the capacity, right? Do the RCMP have capacity to train extra people more than the CBSA does? It doesn't sound like it. There's a car alarm going off in my neighborhood right now. So apologies, I'm a little distracted because I can hear the car alarm. But these announcements, Mark Carney, we're building stronger, safer communities, blah, 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 blah. These announcements are daily, but they're not doing that. Mark Carney's been the prime minister for months now. He hasn't done a damn thing. He's taken vacation. He's done nothing. He hasn't done anything he's promised to do. Nothing at all. It's wild that Mark Carney is saying, oh yeah, like we're totally building things that are good. You're building bureaucracy, if anything. Keith says you're not actually doing any of these things. It's true. Table Salt says Mark Carney's Liberal government has approved $25 million for Senegal. Yay, Senegal. Is it for billboards to tell them to not poop on the beach? Because we could use some of those in Ontario to provide... I was actually just making a joke about the pooping on the beach in Ontario, not trying to make a joke at the expense of the Senegalese. I don't know if people in Senegal poop on the beach. To provide technical training for vulnerable women in the blue and green circular economy to promote adaptation to climate change. Oh, so it's money laundering. And Table Salt has an image, and oftentimes she links to it later in the thread. But yeah, we're just sending money to encourage a green circular economy, which is absolute nonsense. Guelph is trying this circular economy too, and they were trying to sell it with regards to food, and they were saying, food that's expiring should be cheaper and go to other places and all this stuff. And I was like, listen, people don't want to eat garbage. Like, why are you trying to make us eat garbage? We know how to eat food. We know how to produce food. We're agricultural superpower. Why are you trying to make us eat garbage? And they didn't like me questioning them, so they blocked me. But yeah, there's supposed to be this whole circular food economy, and they're doing it with the University of Guelph. But again, it's a lot of papers and a lot of theory, no practical anything, and it doesn't work. It's not going to work. People want to eat beef and like nice cuts of meat and stuff, not the leftovers, right? They don't want to eat organs, like, right? Anyway, it's frustrating to have such an incompetent and it seems like purposely bad government. And they're purposely bad because it seems like they're trying to sabotage everything about the country. Pierre Poilievre says, Prime Minister Carney, your finance minister, inked multi-billion-dollar contracts with Stellantis, the battery company. Auto workers deserve to know if their jobs will be protected. Canadians deserve to know what you gave away. Read Donald Trump is certainly making business conditions uncomfortable for people who are outside the country or outside of the USMCA. And if you are going to be inside the country, then you get a break on all that stuff. So why would anybody build a battery plant that's not included in the USMCA in Canada, right? If it's not, and it may be included in the USMCA, but if it was included, they'd build in Canada. But again, there's a lot of different reasons, not just the USMCA. If they were included in the USMCA, then they might build in Canada. But if you compare apples to apples, the building costs and the ongoing operating costs of a plant in Ontario versus a plant in, say, Ohio, you're going to have, I think, probably cheaper labor, although the auto unions might have something to say about that. So the auto unions are probably operating in Ohio just as much as they're operating in Ontario. And so wages will probably be comparable, but the building costs will be cheaper in Ohio. The taxes will be cheaper in Ohio. The taxes at the payment of the salaries will be cheaper in Ohio. You can offer, I think, a lower salary with the person taking home about the same. And so I think salary edge goes to USA. And so if you look at all that stuff, even with the government subsidies of billions of dollars, it still doesn't make it worth it. And so they go to the United States to have all the advantages there. And so we can't compete when we're not functionally the United States. And even when we functionally are, our labor is more expensive and our material is more expensive because our dollar's weaker, right? And so sorry about our luck, but we need to make a good business case, and we don't look like that. We just don't look like that on paper. And so I don't need to know anything like that, what he gave away. But it's interesting that multi-billion-dollar deals are inked with Stellantis, and they still can't retain businesses because the deal they offer is so bad, right? That's incompetence or purposeful. I'm not sure. The real Mr. Bench says Carney Liberals promise to keep Canada safe. The public safety minister, Anna Sangri, commits again to hiring 1,000 new CBSA agents. So it's RCMP and CBSA agents, but this is going to be broken down over 5 years, 200 new border guards each year. They don't have a 5-year mandate. We're going to hire 200 more every year for 5 years while we're here. They're not here for 5 years. They may be, I guess, but it's a minority government. Usually minority governments don't last for more than 2, except for the last one because it was functionally a majority. Here is Anna Sangri confirming that the CBSA agents will be phased in over 5 years. And what does Trump think about that? I don't think that's the deal that Trump was agreeing to, right? Although it wasn't really a deal.
During the election campaign, we were clear that our borders had to be secure so everyone in Canada can feel safe. And we promised to hire 1,000 new CBSA officers to bolster our border protection efforts. Today, we're announcing that we will fund those positions as well as other important enhancements that will help CBSA officers do their jobs more effectively. We will spend $617.7 million over 5 years to train, hire, and deploy 1,000 CBSA officers. These people will do critical work at our borders, ensuring the smooth movement of people and goods, all the while making sure that illegal goods, guns, and drugs are stopped, and those who are trafficking in them are arrested and charged. This funding will support specialized operational and analysts who identify individuals and entities suspected of having links to organized crime, human smuggling, immigration fraud, and terrorism. This money will also allow CBSA to support additional positions targeting high-risk areas in rail, marine, postal, courier, pre-departure, and highways. We will also increase CBSA's recruitment stipend to $525 a week from $125 that's presently available. That stipend has been frozen since 2005, so long past due for a boost. And finally, we will amend the Public Service Superannuation Act to expand early retirement eligibility, also known as 25 and out. And don't get any ideas, guys, okay? It's still early, but it really does enhance the broader package that's available to the CBSA.
So offering all of these perks and things is going to attract all of these new employees who want to be CBSA agents from India. Obviously. Mocha says, confirmed the village of Empress mayor resigns the very next morning after Mocha Bezergad. I'm getting his name terribly wrong, and I don't mean to. I'm sorry. I'm just bad at reading names. His expose on the missing $3 million taxpayer funds. More to come on all of that. So very, very interesting. Seems like the mayor doesn't want to get caught up in all of this. Maybe he's already caught up in all of this. So I'll keep you updated on that if that story develops further. Table Salt says Canada tanks from 5th to 33rd. 33rd, you say? In the quality of life index in 11 years. You know what we should probably do, right? Bring in 1.5 million more temporary workers. Vote Liberal again. Raise taxes as well. Why not? Why not? Yahtzee, right? That's the only solution Liberals know. So this was in quality of life, and apparently Liberals in Canada has fallen a whole bunch. 33, we've fallen 33 points to 36th. Before, we were in 3rd place. In 2015, Canada ranked 3rd in global prosperity. After 10 years under the Liberals, we're now 36th. What happened? So what happened is a decade of destruction. That's what happened. Here is these guys talking about this. This is Nick Nanos. I don't trust Nick Nanos or his polls So take it with a grain of salt, as you take everything with a grain of salt. Please, it's the internet.
The next generation of Canadians, what do they think about their standard of living? Where do they expect to be?
These are killer stats,
Okay.
Roger. You know, we track every 90 days. We ask Canadians whether they think that the next generation will have a higher, lower, or the same standard of living. In the latest round that we just completed a couple of weeks ago, 8%, Roger. Only 8% think that the next generation will have a higher standard of living. Almost 2 out of every 3 Canadians, 64%, think that the next generation will have a lower standard of living. And, you know, the thing is, that negativity on the lower standard of living has increased since the election from 59 to 64. Now, I guess one way to look at it, if we go like way back, you know, the thing is that, you know, we see that those negative numbers have been as high as 70. But the fact of the matter is, today, Canadians are 8 times more likely to think that the next generation will have a lower standard of living.
That is an incredible swing in 13 years. When was the last time do you have the numbers on when it was this bad?
Well, when Justin Trudeau was Prime Minister.
Is that when it was?
Uh-oh. Yeah, well, when he was Prime Minister, things there was a lot of negativity. Actually, it was more negative when he was Prime Minister, and you know, just before the election, the numbers were, I think, at around 70% in terms of lower when we look back at the March numbers. But they improved a little bit, and now they're going back into negative territory, Roger.
Well, I don't see how you can look at all of these clowns running the country into the ground and think to yourself, man, just a few more years of this and we're sure to strike gold. Like, obviously, all of this pain will be worth it in the end when we get paid out for this, right? But we're not going to get paid out for this. They're just stealing from us. It's only going to get worse. It's not getting better. We have to stop the bad policies. We can't just allow them to keep doing all of this crap. So I don't know how anybody can look at these policies and say, oh yeah, we've just got to hold on a little bit longer. These policies are going to work at some point. They're not. They failed. They are failing. Donald Trump's policies and what he's doing with the United States, those are successful policies, it seems, for a country, right? Closing the border seems like it's worked a treat. There are a whole bunch of, well, and I mean, there are things I think that are happening to replace that influx with flights and things like that. But by and large, closing the big holes in the bad policy has enabled the United States to find its footing and start rebuilding its economy. And you can see that in a whole bunch of numbers. And Canada, we haven't found our footing yet. We're still laying on the ground bleeding, and we've got to stop the bleeding before we can find our footing. Gosh. Roman Baber says the House of Commons convened for the fall session on September 15th, 2025. Since then, out of 18 days sitting, Carney's attendance at question period was 7 times. Now he's jetting off to Asia for 9 days. Mark Carney doesn't like it here in Canada. Nope, he hasn't lived here very long. He parachuted in, lived here for 6 months, and then was the prime minister, right? People didn't like that of Ignatieff, but they looked the other way with Mark Carney. I think he was selected. I think that he was placed. He didn't win an election at all. Table Salt says, breaking, TD closes their call center in Moncton, New Brunswick, 575 jobs to get the axe. This after TD received $8.8 million from New Brunswick taxpayers to build the center in 2017. Realtor is shaking after all the desperate phone calls she's getting. So it's not good. People are upset. This is almost 4 minutes of her talking about this situation. So it's interesting that the government, again, tries to encourage even Canadian businesses to bring business to Canada, and they can't manage it for more than 8 yees, right? Like, I don't know. It seems very suspect to me. Where are these 505? Like, does TD not need these 575 jobs anymore? They don't need the work anymore? It's weird. It seems strange to me, right? Joe Warmington is asking Canadians, because most of his audience is Canadian, and this is just a small little poll, but it's surprising for me. It's not done yet, I guess. There's 4,000 views, 440 votes, and he says, if you had a vote, or could have a vote, who would you choose for the new mayor of New York on November 5th? And Andrew Cuomo gets 25%, Curtis Silwa gets 59%, Mamdini gets 5%, and undecided gets 10%. I mean, I'm not that surprised because Joe Warmington's audience is probably more right wing than your average downtown Toronto dweller or public school teacher, right? But it's still, I'm still kind of surprised in Canada that Mamdini didn't get more. He's going to win the mayorship of New York, and that's not nothing, right? That's pretty wild. And like, I don't know what's going to happen with all of that. And there's been people who bringing up concerns of citizenship and concerns of fraud with his status, but I don't know how legitimate that is, right? That could just be political mudslinging. People are comparing him to Obama. I don't know what's true, but seems very, very strange to have New York turn in that direction, like the same direction as Dearborn, Michigan. Seems strange, but are we going to watch that in real time? Pretty wild stuff. Here's Lisa, and she's responding to Juno News, and I read the report the other day. Ontario spends nearly $500 million to push DEI and race ideology in schools. They really are. They really are spending money on this. And Lisa says, and she's a counselor in Pickering, and she's been dragged through the mud, and nobody's done a damn thing to help fix that mess. And like, where's Doug Ford? Where are the people who should be holding these people, counselors who are using their position to punish Lisa, to account? Where are they? Like, what's happening here? Anyway, Lisa says, hey, Doug Ford, what are you doing? Ontario quietly poured $500 million into pushing DEI and race-based ideology in our schools. Instead of teaching math and literacy, they're teaching kids to divide themselves by skin color and sexual identity. I tried to bring a motion to stop DEI in Pickering. Not one councillor would second it. Not one. If a government has to do something like this quietly, it's because they know it is wrong. It is wrong. It is wrong what they're doing, and they shouldn't do it. It's ridiculous. Table Salt says a proposal from a Sikh organization is currently under serious consideration with the Brampton City Council. The proposal calls for a monument to be erected to honor the martyrs of Battle Shangrihai, where Sikhs battled Afghans in Pakistan in 1897. So this is in front of the Brampton City Council, and is it Patrick Brown who's going to let this go through? Man, pretty wild stuff, right? So here is what's happening when our governments focus on DEI and religious or war monuments for foreign countries. The actual infrastructure gets ignored. And Eva says she's responding to this Montreal blog, and the Montreal blog says, breaking news from August 16, 2024. A significant water main rupture has occurred at the intersection of Delormer Ave and St. Catherine East Street in Montreal, causing severe flooding. Emergency services are on the scene, and the public is urged to avoid the area for their safety. And she says, I wonder if municipal governments focused on providing essential public services, which is their primary responsibility, rather than engaging in social justice activism, which is not their mandate, the quality of essential services in Canada would improve. Considering the significant amount we pay, we should be receiving top-notch services, yet that is not the case. I would encourage more former business people and manager types to run for municipal office. You get run out if you try and run for office. Like, it's quite something to see. If you don't believe in the ideology of all, if you don't believe in the right things, in the right lies, you can't hold office in Canada, period. It should be the most business-oriented level of government, yet is often overlooked. Municipal government plays an important and indispensable role that demands intelligent and competent individuals to oversee these essential and complex services. Instead, we often see individuals with lofty worldly agendas neglecting critical services in pursuit of ideological goals. Yep. It is what it is. The food professor says, we've long been warned that when ideology replaces debate, democracy weakens. We see it now with the carbon tax, with the Elbows Up movement, and greedflation. Restoring space for good faith disagreement without moral condemnation is... Oh, my YouTube stream is degraded, I guess. She says, Aboriginal title is an existential threat to British Columbia. Not so good. And Jim says, well, you've already seen this. I'm going to have to kill the stream anyway, so sorry, YouTube, if it ended a little bit early. That's weird. I hope it didn't end early. I hope it's able to finish being played.